Hey, this is Nick, the Mining Book Guy. Today I want to revisit some of my favorite books and authors, 3 to be specific. Each has their own model, their own way of viewing the world. I think this is a really important discussion because I don't read my books, kind of on their own. They all kind of have a crossover and comparing and contrasting, and I think these 3 are especially important to point out. We've got George Friedman with The Next Decade. This book is important, but the most important thing to understand from a model standpoint is that he views things from a geopolitical lens, which is easily becoming one of the most influential ways of viewing the world, not just over the last few years, but probably over the next 10 years. But then we can contrast that with Jim Rickards, who wrote Currency Wars, and he's well known for that as his first book, but if I was only going to recommend one for the model, it'd be The New Case for Gold, which I just read recently, and it really brings together all of his ideas. I think as a great example, we can talk about Jim Rickards and George Friedman and how they may agree on a lot of things and have their own ways of viewing them. One good example being that they expect the U.S. to still be one of the best places in the world probably over the next 5 or 10 years, despite some forms of pessimism. They completely contrast on Europe. At least to my understanding, George Friedman is very pessimistic, thinks that Europe is going to fall apart in various ways, and I think he's actually right on this one. Jim Rickards makes some interesting points, though, how Europe could come together more, or could actually, surprise people, how it comes going back to Charlemagne times, the beginning of, or I guess coming out of the Dark Ages. And you can read about that in his Death of Money book or in some other places, but that's really important to pick out points like that. And another example is that, and where I stick more with Jim Rickards than with George Friedman, is that Jim Rickards incorporates gold, SDRs, and the IMF into a geopolitical view, while George Friedman is more 100% geopolitics. And this is my interpretation. I might not be right about that, exactly how I'm saying it, you might feel a little differently. But in that sense, I actually think Jim Rickards is more on top of things. Maybe George Friedman will say more about SDRs and the IMF and gold in the future, but I need to read both of them to really get a full picture and make my own judgments. And they happen to really be on top of this stuff right now. I really can't think of anyone else for those 2 areas. But this is a really cool wild card. Neil Howe, I've mentioned before. He wrote The Fourth Turning, which is an absolute must-read, maybe even more of a must-read than the other 2 books, but he is, the leader in understanding generations, and even though he focuses more on the U.S., it's even more incredible that his generational lens and model of viewing things literally applies all around the world and to all time periods. And I really want to emphasize the Generations book. I actually didn't go through this in detail until more recently. I'm not even done with it yet. It's so packed with information. The details are so important because I really wish that someone else would go through the same detail that he and William Strauss did for the U.S. going back to the 1500s, 1600s, and looking at every generation up until now, and comparing and contrasting that stuff, and do that for every country in the world. That is an emerging social science in a way. I think it blows away anything else out there. And it's especially important because so few people are on top of it, especially in academia. And so I didn't mention that for Jim Rickards and George Friedman, but the same thing kind of applies. A lot of their ideas are not that accepted in academia, or at least there's not that many experts on them. So you got 3 guys that happen to all be American, but they're all kind of experts in their fields, which aren't widely accepted by the mainstream. That is all really awesome. I could go on and on about some other things, and maybe I will have more videos on them, but I think I'll leave it there as my 3 main models I look at. And I just want to end with just a couple negatives in the sense that some of my favorite books are great books on their own, and at the time the books were written, I think the authors were spot on, but they are not examples of people I follow in terms of models. And just to mention, but not to go into detail, Jim Rogers, Mark Faber, Robert Prechter, at various points in times, incredible at predicting things, and I love some of the books they've written, but they are not the people I follow right now for models. It's these guys. And so I'm always looking to compare and contrast, but I still read their books and learn things from them. So I think that's really important to understand. You need to come up with your own models, and if you actually have your own authors, your own books that you feel the same way as I do about these models, please reach out to me. This is like really deep stuff for me. Like, I'm always looking for this when I'm reading these books, and whether it's mining books or whatever else, always looking for what is going to be happening in the future by reading stuff that's happened in the past. So I've got my email up here, MiningBookGuy@gmail.com. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I will make more videos like this if you did, and please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.